Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are.
Good morning from me.
Perfect. Where are you coming from?
Sacramento.
Nice. Right. Well, we will give everyone a minute or two to hop in. And I think today, from my perspective for team leaders, this is one of the more insightful conversations because team economics and profitable splits is something I have found in my experience that a lot of people really struggle around. And again, I think there's cause and effect, right? I think the cause is lack of structured training around this. You had this whole entire rush of teams. And I believe teams are the future of this business, right? Because teams and collaborative experiences definitely outperform individuals, right? But the goal is at the end of the year that what you do is profitable for you. I can't tell you how many times I have done these individual sessions with high performing teams with lots of top line revenue. And at the end of it, I'll just write 529-C. And I ask people, do you know what that is? And they go, some say yes, some say no. And 529-C is a non-for-profit organization, which is exactly what you don't want your team to be. Because the scary part about this is when we strip a lot of these numbers down, we are not going to like what we see. I have done this many times. And at the end, there are very few people where the numbers actually make sense. And this is kind of a good place to start connecting the dots of what we've been talking about, right? The right value proposition with the right people will equal people feeling good about your business making money, right? Team members that want everything and don't want to pay anything are not good for you, right? So, like, just before we get into the numbers and things, if you're making a marginal 10, 12, 15% off somebody, it's a good gut check for you today of why, right? What is the purpose of having team members? Right. There's a multitude of different ways you can look at this because there's no black and white answer. But this is something that I really want to push all of you in thinking about so that at the end of the year, all the time that you put into this group of individuals is reflected in your business being better, your life being better, and your bank account growing, right? Excuse me. If it does not hit that BLB, business, life, and bank account, don't do it, right? That is the filter which we want to all make decisions through. All right, so let me get into this. So let's look at our agenda for today and our roadmap, right? What does it cost to run your business? What is the value of your time and staff time? Fixed costs versus variable costs, creating profitable splits, and then always our applied learnings of what do we want to do after this. So let's look at your actual costs, right? The number one thing that nobody values nearly enough is your personal time. What is your time worth? Does anyone know what their time is worth? Anybody? Okay, great. We have a great place to start. So if you're in production, approximately, right, for every $500,000 you earn, your time is worth $237 an hour. Right? That's a significant amount of money, right? Then the next thing is you have staff costs. How many people here hit yes have staff members, right? People that they pay salaries to, right? Or even a staff cost could be if you're paying for a Compass TC. This is any amount of money that you pay another human to do something for your team members. Now there's marketing costs, and marketing costs are in different buckets, right? There's a marketing cost to market your brand. Who here feels they have strong brand equity in their market? Okay, so Bill, you're in Raleigh, right? So unmute yourself.
Yes.
Do you know Gretchen Coley or do you familiar with her brand?
Well, I know her because she's with Compass. She's kind of a different part of the triangle, but yeah, I know her.
Yeah, so if you look at her business, they spend insane amounts of money marketing their brand.
Yep.
Local sponsorships, events, billboards, print marketing, content. Like their thing is a machine, right? So like when we looked at her business, right? You need to factor into the splits that all of that stuff is going into when you show up to some place and you're part of the Coley group, it has value, right? I'll never forget this. We do two like one-on-one private retreats for like our individual clients. And the last one we did was Rocktober in Raleigh, right? Brands carry relationship, weight, influence in a marketplace. And myself, my team members, we were doing like a happy hour at Bar Taco and dealing with these people and getting like a menu and like basic stuff was a nightmare, right? So I tell her the day before, like, do you know anyone here? Like, what is going on? Like, and she's like, well, what happened? She goes, this is completely unacceptable. So we go in there and she asks for the manager and they're like, oh, hey, Mrs. Coley, how are you? She goes, I have to tell you that this gentleman right here, this is my party and part of my stuff. And the way you've been treating him is completely unacceptable. And literally I'm sorry. And like this, everything changed. The stuff that we've been trying over a month to get, we got in a matter of 15 minutes. And the rest of the service, the entire experience for us completely changed because the influence of her brand. And when her and I were talking about this, I was like, well, do you ever think about, and she's like, yes, I know what you're going to say, how much money it costs me to have that kind of influence with somebody. Right. So there's marketing cost, right? Then there's lots of variable costs throughout the year. Do you guys pay for team outings for your people? That's a variable cost, right? Do you pay for lifestyle photos and different marketing campaigns and different ideas and trying things, right? Like they're all variable costs throughout the course of the year that you pay for. Then there's technology, coaching, subscriptions, other things that you use in your business that your team members have access to. These are all the costs that need to get factored in when you're making people splits because you're paying for all this stuff. That's why they call brokers brokers, because they're broke, right? Think about this logically. If somebody's keeping 80 to 90% of total gross revenue and they don't have any expenses factored into it, how do they make money? They don't. That's why as agents and as companies, people make money off of mortgage, title, and escrow, the ancillary services, right? But if you look at all these costs, right? Like I see Allison here, she spends a lot of money on marketing and events and stuff for clients. Like all of that goes into the cost of running a business. And if an agent wants to be on your team, they have to understand that their split goes into that. It's the same thing at Compass, right? If you don't use the technology and you're not going to events and you're not getting Compass referrals and all that stuff, you're going to forever be unhappy about the split that you pay because you're not here for the resources. So you don't see a value in the investment you make in what you get. Same thing with your teams, right? These are your actual costs and you need to know what they are obsessively, right? Now, the time, right? I said this and I see a couple of new people hopped on, so welcome. For every $500,000 you earn, your time is approximately worth $237 an hour. So are you tracking the amount of time that you spend with agents? Yes or no? So every time I want you all, here's an action item, and you'll see this in the applied learnings. Every time somebody calls you, you have a structured meeting, at least at minimum, the structured meetings, log the activity and put down the time. Write down what you talked about. Write down, what the action item was. Because at the end of the year, when these people are coming back and asking you for more money, you at least have a running log of what you did for them. Because in their mind, do you think your team members really register how much time you spend with them? Hit yes or no in the chat. No. They think that you're just sitting around because they pay you money to answer all their questions, give them all their leads, pay for all their stuff. The last time I checked, you were a team leader, not their parental figure that birthed them. Big difference, right? Spam callers, got a minute. No, I do not. Then there's your staff time. This is the number one, like if this was energy efficiency, this is where you lose all your energy in home. Staff time. Have your staff log in the same stuff. Do you know how many team members are using staff members like their personal assistants? So here's what happens, right? Your staff members want to please you. So therefore, they're just doing all this stuff that the agents ask them, right? Because they believe they're in the customer service business. Now, the stuff that you actually want them to do is not getting done. You're disappointed. They're frustrated because it's a boundaryless thing. And this is where the merry-go-round goes round and round and round and round. You need to be very, very clear. Here's what the staff does for you. Here's what the staff does not do for you. And here's what the staff will never do for you. But again, that goes back to value proposition, onboarding, and some of the things we talked about in the last few sessions. Who here understands now, like the amount of time, efforts, and purposeful activities that you need to build a profitable team? Raise your hand. I see your awakening coming, Bill. Reluctant, but you're in the party, you know? They always say the first part about being on the path to recovery is admitting you have a problem. And look, I don't think this is personally anyone's fault, right? It's not like there's an abundance of training out here on this. There really isn't, right? So the first part is just awareness. So let's go through the fixed versus variable costs. And I want to add a couple more things on here for you, like fixed cost, staff, listing, marketing. Like if you have a fixed package based on what everyone does, your time, variable costs, lifestyle shoots, team outings, client events, one-off marketing, right? You need to understand the difference in costs and go back last year to understand like, okay, great. Here's the money I would have spent. Like, here's all the money I spent, right? And then start to like think about like how much money would have actually spent if it was just me, right? I always tell people in many cases, right? You could have yourself, an admin, a TC, and a salaried agent, and you could run lean and profitable. Couple questions. No, you as an agent should not be profiting from mortgage sale and escrow. You should get them to pay for as much stuff in correlation with the business you send, right? But we can touch base on that in the end. Yeah, variable costs can show up in many different ways, right? We should understand in terms of fixed cost, like cost of sale, right? And we should have, just based on the law of averages, a number that we can align on. That every time I sell a property, whether it's for a listing or for a buyer, my time, staff time in total, like this is what it costs the company. But this is really running your business like a business, right? And the other part is, and this is why I think it's so challenging for people, this is like literally having a brain of like an accountant, right? Are salespeople good accountants? Hell no. I can raise my hand and say this, right? I have hired 2 different companies for myself. And I literally do this and I go through like, if you've ever worked with me individually, I will go through every single expense in your entire business, keep it, cut it, like, and stress test. It's not that I don't know how to do this because I do it all the time for people, right? However, I also know for myself that it's something much easier to delegate, right? So this is where I just want to touch. Does anyone know the difference between a bookkeeper, an accountant, a CPA, and a tax planner? Anybody? Okay, good. This is the time that we'll allow this to you. Brian, what do you feel the 4 things are? What's a bookkeeper?
Well, a bookkeeper is someone, like if you use QuickBooks, for example, the bookkeeper is the one that's going to help you know and understand how to use QuickBooks, how to interpret the information found in QuickBooks, and keeps the flow of the day-to-day ledger of your business.
So a bookkeeper is someone that's going to help you learn how to categorize the things. I hope you tell them how to categorize them so you can understand them versus whatever they tell you. And that's their job, just like categorizing transactions and presenting data. Now, what's an accountant?
Well, your accountant's going to help you with your tax filings and what you can write off and cannot write off, and where the red flags are and where the green lights are, and how much money you end up having to pay the state and the Fed.
And what's a CPA?
A certified public accountant. I'm not sure how you're defining the difference between an accountant or a certified.
One,
public
it just one has a designation in additional education, right?
Okay.
That's it. Like my brother's a CPA, right? Now, what's a tax planner?
A tax plan would be something that you probably work on with your accountant or your CPA for how you're going to be paying your quarterly taxes over the next year.
Or how you're going to minimize them,
What's that?
or how you're going to minimize them as much as possible, like a strategy for how you're going to like avoid as many taxes as you can.
Ryan, I saw you shaking your head. What do you want to add?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I meant to be shaking my head like this.
So let me explain the difference to you. A bookkeeper is the most elementary form of financial planning, right? An accountant and a CPA, do you know what the problem with both of those are? They play defense, they don't play offense, meaning they wait till the end of the year and say, okay, what can we figure out how to do? Very bad, right? Now, tax planners, by the nature of the word, are planners, right? Great tax planners will run your QuickBooks for you, right? They'll meet with you quarterly and look at your income, look at your expenses, provide you monthly P&Ls, and also plan how you're going to spend money, invest money, minimize your tax liability. Here's a fun thing that I know from my CPA. How many people spend tens of thousands or $100,000+ on quarterly taxes? Did you know in America, if you take a W-2 salary out of your corporation, you can actually and pay taxes through there, you can actually defer every single quarterly tax payment and either invest in an account or use it in your business and not have to pay till December 31st. Did anybody know that? Some people do, some people don't, right? Like you don't have to pay quarterly taxes, right? Tax planning is another thing, and I encourage you all to get a tax planner, right? Like myself, Rory, Matt Brattenbach, Ben Moss, and like Gretchen, many of the top agents we work with, we all use the same tax planner. We call him Magic Joe. Literally, the things that this guy can do, it's like magic. Like the one thing I don't worry about in life is taxes, right? True wealth is built through tax planning, 100%, right? So for anyone that wants an introduction, they have one of their team members. Why am I drawing a blank? It's with an S. I think it's Sabina, Serena. I can make an email introduction so they know that you're like part of our community. And what they'll do is they'll have you upload your last year taxes to a private portal, and then they'll have a consultation with you, and they'll literally go through your taxes and show you how much money they'll save you, right? They're not cheap. It is a fairly significant bill, but what you save in taxes is far, far more, right? Then the other thing that I use is I use another financial company, right? Like they're financial planners by trade, but like they go through all of my expenses, retirement accounts, Social Security, and all this stuff. And I have meetings with them on an ongoing basis where they're presenting me all the information in ways that make sense to me. And I use them as a virtual CFO and a sounding board, right? Like, should I spend money on this? Should I not? Because I know the way that my tax planner is running my QuickBooks, it's like a multitude of complicated things so that I can minimize my tax liability. But on the other end, I need to understand, just like you, I have tons of different fixed costs, variable costs, subscriptions costs, and all these things to understand, right? So if you look at our business, it's like we have all of these things that we do for you over the course of a year, from live events to technology to design to stuff. So we really have to figure out like the economics of all this so it makes sense and we can continue to keep investing, right? So these are different things I want you to think about as a business owner, right? So my email is cs@chiragshahcoaching.com. If you have a question or you want an introduction, just email me and I'll make the introduction today. Sound good? But you need to understand these costs in your business. Does anyone do this today and like really know their numbers? Kind of.
Yeah,
Look,
I mean,
no one-
I'm a early stage, well, rudimentary understanding, a CEO's understanding of all of our numbers, and my director of operations knows everything.
Okay, so here's the next thing, right? How many of you know David Yoon, who was at Compass, who passed away a little more than a year ago? Well, Allison, yeah, we know David. David was the guy was just like a light in a room, right? Like he came in the room, it was like the spotlights at Yankee Stadium going on. And one morning, he just got into a car accident and died, right? But he literally had nothing planned. So his life partner and business partner, she was left with a mess, right? No one knew where anything was. Over the last 24 months, we've had there's a thing in larger businesses called key man policy. Like you literally can take an insurance policy out on a key member of a significant sum of money because if they die, like you need money to refill them, right? So all of you that have captive businesses, these key employees, and like people show up like, yeah, I have the best director of operations. They know everything. I don't have to think about anything. And I'm like, that's absolutely horrible. Jaw hits the ground. Why? What happens if they leave? What happens if they get sick? What happens if they win the lotto? What happens if they just don't like you one day because one day you have a bad day and like you need to know all of this information. Like it needs to be documented. So these are all things that you really need to like think about, like running your business going forward. Now, here's the thing, like these are just made up numbers, right? Gross versus net. Gross is when you get a commission check of $10,000. Your split is 80%. So now you're at $8,000, right? Now there are expenses associated to this. And then there's your net income, right? This is if you run a transaction, right? So rule number one is always base the splits that you have with your team members off your after Compass split. So if you check is $10,000, you have an 80% split, your split with them, whatever it is, needs to be off $8,000, not 10, right? Then there's also the idea of how do we start building in minimal fees into our business, right? Like a marketing fee, an admin fee, right? Because we can multiply those out and over the course of a year, somebody might not mind spending $250 here, $500 there. But if you do 100 transactions, that turns into real money, right? Fastest way to boost profitability. So just remember, always pay off the net, never pay off the gross. And if you're making only, who is that? Susie, I see your face. Yep. Because if you're paying off the gross, you're not left with much. Like you're eating money. So creating profitable splits. Number one, you have to look at how much you made off of each agent in total. Well, I made $40,000. No, you did not. You did not, right? Because there's all these different factors in there, right? But you need production minimums. How much does somebody need to make at minimum when we know our numbers to breathe air in the same pace you do, take your time, your staff resources, and the investments they make in them? Look, I always say when you interview people, right? And we'll get into this in recruiting. I always ask people a question when I hire them. I'm like, how much money do you need to make? And they'll give me a number. I'm like, okay, great. What happens this year if you don't make that much money? If there is anything besides like, if I don't make that money, there's like a negative consequence or I can't take this job or something really strong tying them to that number, it's a red flag for me. Right? The amount of people that work because they really just want to work and then will go above and beyond and do what they need to, it's not many. When you're talking to self-employed people, if they don't need to make real money and don't have anything tied, you have a hobbyist, not a professional. And that's a liability to your brand. You need to factor in the variable and fixed costs that you have throughout the year. Right? So if you made an average of $20,000 a person, and now you take the fixed cost, variable costs, divide them equally, there's a net income at the end of it. And I always call it to remember the rule of Schrag's rule of one extra deal. If you could sell one more house on your own, it's much easier than managing a person to make that same amount of money off them throughout the year. Like you need tight ops, budgeting, planning, execution. Like there needs to be real structure, right? And look, some people could just have team members to help them with their deals and they're not making a ton of money, but they get a ton of life out of it, depending on where you are in your life. And that's cool, right? Like I'm not just saying that everything needs to be a cash machine. I'm just saying if you're spending all this money on overhead, I always tell people challenge yourself. Is it better to go super lean, like do some sales, have a lot of one-on-one support for you and your clients and hire a salaried agent? Allison, I know we've talked about this, right? Like it's much easier. So really value you and your time. So here's what I want you to do. Start tracking in your CRM the time people spend with you and your staff. Review last year's fixed and variable costs and build an actual budget. And number 4, like you have to have production minimums. All right, so now we have 5 minutes for some questions. Bill, you had a couple. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah. How do you implement production minimums, and what are the consequences of not meeting them? I mean, the obvious answer is you can't be on the team anymore. But like, how do you start that
There's only
conversation?
one thing I look for in production minimums, right? If you have somebody that's coming to your meetings, doing open houses, doing all the things you say, going above and beyond, picking up things, and they're not hitting the minimums, that's on you, right? Because they're doing what they need to do. Like there's ongoing activities, effort, and a desire, right? Now, you look at the other side of the coin, people that don't want to do open houses, want to get paid with them, don't follow up on leads, or not showing up to the coaching sessions that you guys are all sitting on with me. Those are all major red flags, right? If a team leader is sitting through coaching and the team members think it's like beyond them or above them, that's like red flag, right? Like if you have time, they have time, right? The amount of people that do 6 to 10 deals a year that say that they're too busy to do anything, it's to me, it's like, you're kidding me. Let me see the screen time of your phone and I could show you all the time you waste every day. Right? So, but here's the thing. This is where culture comes in, right? Like killers and executors want to be around killers and executors. That's why you all love these meetings. There has to be a high value on you, your time, and what it takes to be on this team. Think about it. You look at the Navy SEALs, right? Like it's an elite group of people. And they say they like people they can trust and people that show up more than like the most skilled people. Anyone else have a question? Or an aha moment they'd like to share? Well, I will. Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, I realized I'm overpaying. So I'm not sure how to either pull that back or maybe we just make adjustments with new team members going forward. But
I think that I think part of it is redoing it, right? Like I think we can have a separate conversation about redoing splits, right? And I think it's also explaining it to your team members, being transparent, like here's the cost, here's the stuff, and that like the company needs to be profitable to maintain this level of resources. I don't think being honest is bad, right?
I have a question.
Yep.
So is there a target kind of number that you should be looking for when you hire an agent for the return on the investment that you're putting into them? So
I would want to make a minimum of $30,000 a person, or a minimum 25.
Is that gross or net?
Net, right?
Yep. Well, look, you're going to grow over time, right? So you might start off by like grossing 25, 30, right? But this is where knowing your numbers is like how much you put into an agent a year, right? And then what is the purpose? How much money do you want to make off this people? It goes into goal setting, right? So once you figure out I want to make $100,000 for my team, well, how am I going to get there and how's it going to make the most sense? And look, remember the exercise we said about knowing your value proposition and going around to your team members and ask them what did they use and what did they enjoy? Do you know how many things team leaders spend money on that nobody uses and nobody cares about but you, just cut.
How do you factor in the value of an agent where they're really helping you with your life aspect of it? So like doing the
There's
open
no
houses,
value.
running lock boxes.
If they're like, if you have kids and you have an agent that works all the time for you and stuff like that, and you're paying them money and that's the role that they fill, great. Like, it doesn't matter. That is a real, to me, that's more valuable than money. Right? So like, let's pretend that you are a listing agent in a market that you have to show properties every single weekend and open your listings, right? But now you have an agent on your team that does all of the showings, all of the open houses and everything else, and you give 15% of every deal to, and now you can sit at home on the weekends, win, right? So I'm not looking at what I'm making. What I'm making back there is a surplus of time, right? And out of that surplus of time, I can put some time back into my family, my personal life, and the reason I started a team. And B, I can take that extra time and prospect a few extra clients, because 1 or 2 extra clients will be far more than whatever you paid them in split, and you're ahead. But it's that comes down into alignment of model and purpose, right? So look, as you can see, and I have to jump into another call, is there's so much digging in here that we all need to think about, right? And the nice part is we have an entire year together, so we're going to figure it out together, right? I'm all for bonus calls, implementation calls, cutting back the split calls. Like, look, in the end, like I tell my team this all the time, we're not a coaching company, we're in the client experience business, like period, end of story, right? Like, we gain fulfillment out of you winning. That's why I always ask for wins. Like, it's like the best part of every call when you hear people have like these small shifts, right? Like when Brian learns how to have a more profitable splits with his agents and his team members feel good about it, like that's a huge win. So the first part is awareness. We don't need to do anything rash or crazy. We just need to start thinking about this and paying attention to it. And Bill's last comment, I've found to be the law of nature, 50-50 splits is the only profitable way, and a minimum of 1,500 and a listing fee. Yeah. That's great advice. Right?
We've tried everything. We've tried everything. It always comes down to we're getting about 50%.
Yeah, and here's the other part too, right? Is when you're going through different models, right? Think about how your team members are going to respond. And if your model is driven on giving your team leads, make all your money on your leads. Don't start telling them, I need you to prospect for more of your own business. No, you don't. Let them eat off of your leads, make your money off of them, and let them do a few deals on their own on higher splits from their sphere, right? Unless you have the brokerage model that just trades stuff for money, most of us want kumbaya team models. So you have to be clear on what our value proposition. So happy to continue this conversation on just like an open Q&A call, but I have to jump. Love in my heart. Love you all. If you want an introduction to people that are going to save you lots of money on taxes, just email me and we got you. Bye, everybody.